Harold ate these 5 fruits every day. What happened after 90 days shocked his doctor. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something that might hit close to home. Have you ever looked in the mirror and felt like something inside you was slipping? Not just wrinkles or a stiff back, but that quiet realization that the energy, the confidence, the spark you once had is fading. You tell yourself, it's normal, that this is just what getting older feels like. But what if it wasn't? What if there was something small, something natural you could do today that might just give you part of that spark back? This is the story of Harold and the 5 fruits that changed everything. Vermont, early autumn. The kind of town where the leaves don't fall. They blaze in orange and crimson before floating down like whispers. In a small cedar cabin, tucked at the edge of a maple grove, lived Harold Jennings, age 74. From the outside, his life looked peaceful, routine, even. Every morning, he brewed his favorite oolong tea, sat on the front porch with a wool blanket over his knees, and watched the squirrels steal from the bird feeder. But inside that stillness was a heaviness. Harold rarely admitted to anyone, not even himself. Harold had been a high school history teacher for nearly 40 years. The kind who remembered your name 10 years after you graduated, who told the stories behind the wars, not just the dates. His wife Margaret used to say, he could make the past come alive with just his voice. She was gone now. 2 years had passed, and though Harold still kept her photo on the mantel, he hadn't spoken her name aloud in months. Since she died, something inside Harold had dimmed. He still kept the house clean, still read the paper every morning, but everything took more effort, a little more breath to climb the stairs, a little longer to rise from his favorite chair. His hands trembled now when he poured his tea. His doctor said it was just aging, and Harold nodded. But deep down, it didn't feel that simple. Harold's biggest fear wasn't death. It was dependence. The thought of needing someone to bathe him, to feed him, of becoming a burden, was more terrifying than any illness. And yet every week, his body gave him more reasons to worry. His legs felt like sandbags. His memory was foggier than it used to be. And sometimes he found himself staring at the fridge, unsure why he'd opened it. He tried to push through it, walked around the block a few times a week, cut back on red meat, even tried one of those powdered superfood drinks his nephew ordered him online, but none of it felt real. Nothing changed. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't weak-minded, but he was tired of fighting invisible battles. Then came the annual checkup. The clinic hadn't changed since the 80s. Same dusty magazines, same humming fluorescent lights. His physician, Dr. Lansing, was kind but direct. "Harold," she said, peering over her glasses, "your blood pressure's climbing. Your cholesterol isn't where it should be. And your grip strength, well, it's a lot lower than last year." Harold stayed silent. "I know you live alone, and I have to be honest. If things keep trending this way, you may need assistance with daily tasks within the next year." That sentence stayed with Harold all the way home. The drive through the winding, gold-lined roads felt longer than usual. He didn't turn the radio on. That night, he couldn't sleep. He wandered the house, opening cabinets without purpose. In a quiet moment, he found himself in the attic, looking through a box marked Margaret, Kitchen. Among her handwritten recipes and dried flowers was a small leather-bound notebook. Natural Health Notes, it said on the cover. He opened it. Pages filled with Margaret's tidy cursive danced before his eyes, notes on herbs, teas, homemade remedies. But one page was circled in red ink. 5 fruits to rebuild a tired body. After 70. Underneath were just 5 names. Blueberries, pomegranate, banana, kiwi, papaya. Harold stared at the list. He almost laughed. "Margaret," he whispered, "only you would believe something so simple." But then again, what did he have to lose? The next morning, Harold walked slowly to the small local grocery store. The cashier, a college kid with headphones in, didn't even look up when Harold placed the fruits on the conveyor belt. Back home, he lined them up on the counter like old friends. That evening, he peeled a kiwi, sliced some papaya, and poured a handful of blueberries into a bowl. He didn't expect magic. He wasn't chasing miracles, just trying something real, something that felt like her. That night, for the first time in weeks, he slept 6 hours straight. But Harold didn't know yet that this small, quiet decision, made in the middle of a lonely kitchen, would soon lead to a transformation so profound his doctor would barely recognize him. And neither would he. There's a strange silence that follows bad news, not the loud panic of an emergency, but the quiet, creeping kind. The kind that sinks into your bones. That's exactly what Harold felt as he left the clinic that Tuesday morning. The wind outside was cold, hums unfiltered through clouds like weak tea, but Harold didn't notice any of it. All he could hear was that one line from Dr. Lansing repeating in his head, "You may need assistance with daily tasks within the next year." The drive back home should have been comforting. The rolling hills, the amber fields, the old barn, just past Miller's Creek. They were all part of Harold's everyday life, but now they felt distant, unfamiliar, as if the world had suddenly changed its shape around him when he pulled into his graveled driveway. He didn't go inside right away. He just sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel, watching the front porch, where Margaret used to wait for him, with a cup of tea and a soft smile. Inside the house, it was quiet. Too quiet. He hung up his coat, made himself a lukewarm cup of tea, but couldn't bring himself to drink it. Every step felt heavier now, not because of pain, but because of what it all meant. He shuffled into the second living room, glanced up at Margaret's photo on the mantel, and whispered, "Am I really that far gone?" For the next few days, Harold went through the motions like a ghost in his own home. He cooked simple meals, watched old reruns of MASH, and read a few chapters from his weathered paperback of To Kill a Mockingbird. But the fire was missing. He didn't tell anyone about the doctor's warning, not even his neighbor Frank, who usually dropped by once a week to talk football and help fix the gutters. Then came the attic. Harold hadn't been up there in months, maybe years. The pull-down ladder creaked like it always had, but something called him up. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was Margaret. As he stepped into the dust-scented dimness of old memories, he started going through boxes marked with fading Sharpie Christmas school papers, Margaret's kitchen. And there it was, Margaret's little brown notebook, wedged between a tin of old cookie cutters and a dried-out bundle of rosemary. He opened it with trembling hands. The first few pages brought a smile to his face. Scribbles about lavender oil, soup recipes, notes on honey and sleep. But then, about halfway through the book, something stood out. Something circled in red ink, with an exclamation mark beside it. It read 5 fruits to rebuild a tired body. After 70, a daily ritual of renewal. Harold raised an eyebrow. It sounded like something from a health magazine, but the handwriting was hers. Below the title were the names: blueberries, pomegranate, banana, kiwi, papaya. There were no detailed instructions, no dosages, no promises, just 5 names and a quiet sense of urgency. Harold sat back on the attic floor, the notebook open in his lap, and felt something stir. It wasn't quite hope, not yet, but it was curiosity. And something else: love. Margaret had written this before she passed. Had she meant it for herself? For him? That night, Harold couldn't sleep. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, the notebook on his nightstand, the words still floating in his mind. A daily ritual of renewal. He thought about how far he drifted from anything that resembled a ritual since Margaret's passing. His days had become hollow routines. Maybe that's what she was trying to offer. Something small, something simple. A way back. The next morning, Harold got up earlier than usual. He skipped his usual toast and jam breakfast and instead headed to the little co-op market in town. The bell above the door jingled as he walked in. The air smelled like ripe peaches and old wood. He scanned the produce aisle, heart pounding faster than it should. Blueberries, check. Bananas, check. Kiwi, yes. Pomegranate, tucked behind the apples. Papaya, only one left. Back home, he lined the fruits on the kitchen counter like he was preparing for a sacred ritual. He washed them slowly, almost reverently. No blending, no fancy recipes. Just one of each, fresh and whole. He sat down, took a bite of papaya, and whispered, "Here's to you, Margaret." At first, nothing changed. No instant energy, no lightning bolt of transformation. Just the taste of fresh fruit and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. But something about it felt right, like a small piece of himself had returned. And in that moment, for the first time in weeks, Harold felt something else control. He had made a choice, a conscious, intentional choice to do something for himself. And it wasn't just about health anymore. It was about honoring a promise, to live, to keep going, to believe that even in his 70s, it wasn't too late to change. That night, Harold closed the notebook, placed it gently in the drawer beside his bed, and set his alarm for 7 a.m. Tomorrow, he'd do it again. Because maybe, just maybe, 5 fruits could do what no medication had done. Remind him that he was still alive. There's a moment in every journey when doubt creeps in. Not loudly, not all at once, but in the quiet, ordinary places. That moment came for Harold on day 14. The sun had barely lifted above the trees. He sat at his kitchen table, same as always, the 5 fruits laid out neatly in front of him, like obedient soldiers: blueberries, pomegranate, banana, kiwi, papaya. It had become a habit now, this little ceremony. But that morning, Harold stared at the plate longer than usual. His back ached. His knees throbbed. He hadn't slept well, and despite 2 full weeks of doing everything right, he still felt old. The disappointment settled in like fog. 2 weeks ago, this had felt like something sacred, a ritual passed down from Margaret's hands. But now, it felt like wishful thinking. Harold peeled the banana, chewing it slowly, but with none of the gratitude he'd started with. He even skipped the papaya entirely that morning. What was the point? His legs were still weak. His hands still trembled. The weight of expectation sat heavy on his chest. That afternoon, as he tried to take a short walk through the maple grove behind his house, his right leg gave out halfway. He didn't fall, but he stumbled just enough to feel the panic rise in his throat. He grabbed a branch for balance and stood there, chest heaving, eyes stinging from something more than the cold air. It wasn't just a stumble. It was a reminder that time doesn't wait for rituals, that aging doesn't care about effort, or love, or blueberries. That night, Harold didn't eat dinner. He sat in the living room with the lights off, letting the glow of the fireplace flicker across the walls. The silence in the house was louder than ever. It echoed with memories. Margaret's laughter from the kitchen, the shuffle of her slippers, the way she hummed when she cooked. And now, here he was, just an old man chasing hope through fruit bowls. He went to bed without brushing his teeth, and for the first time since he'd found Margaret's notebook, he considered giving up. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. As Harold washed his face in the bathroom, he looked up and for a split second didn't recognize the man in the mirror. Not because of how much he'd aged, but because of how lost he looked. The slumped shoulders, the blank expression, the hollow eyes. Then something inside him snapped. He turned off the faucet and whispered, "No, not like this." He walked to the kitchen, opened the fruit drawer, and slowly, methodically began preparing the same 5 pieces. He didn't feel strong. He didn't feel hopeful. But he was done, letting fear make his decisions. "I'm not expecting a miracle," he muttered, slicing the kiwi. "But I won't betray her memory either." As the days went on, Harold kept going, not out of enthusiasm, but out of commitment. He wasn't tracking results anymore. He wasn't checking his pulse or weighing himself. He just followed the ritual. Each fruit was a silent promise, a quiet prayer to the part of him that still wanted to live fully. And then on day 24, something changed. He bent down to tie his shoes and realized he'd done it without groaning. It caught him off guard. The next day, he carried in groceries from the car without stopping to catch his breath. The day after that, he slept through the night without waking up once. These weren't dramatic transformations, but they were real. They were his. Still, the greatest change wasn't in his muscles or joints. It was in his reflection. By day 30, Harold stood taller. His steps, though slow, had purpose. And for the first time in months, he greeted Frank at the mailbox with a grin. "You look good, old man," Frank joked. "New vitamins." Harold just smiled. Something like that. Later that night, as he flipped through Margaret's notebook again, he came across a scribbled line in the margin of the fruit page. "When you feed your body with life, it remembers how to live." Harold touched the page gently, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was just surviving. He felt like he was becoming again, rebuilding from the inside out. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It wasn't a miracle. It was a quiet morning in early November, and Harold was peeling a pomegranate by the window. The sun cut through the blinds in long golden lines, the kind that painted the floor like something out of an old photograph. He wasn't thinking about aging, or decline, or doctors, just the rhythm of his hands and the sound of seeds dropping into a bowl. That was the moment he realized. He hadn't felt short of breath in days. He didn't rush to celebrate, didn't run to the mirror or call Frank to brag. He simply sat down, ate his fruit, and let the silence wash over him. Not empty silence this time, but peaceful, whole. Something inside his body had shifted, and for the first time in a long time, Harold wasn't trying to catch up with life. He was walking alongside it. That afternoon, he took a longer walk than usual down the old dirt path through the maple grove, past the wooden bench where he and Margaret used to sit and read aloud to each other. His feet moved with more ease than they had in years. His spine felt straighter. His knees still ached. Yes, but they weren't buckling. His balance had returned, like a loyal friend who'd wandered off, but found their way home. By the time he reached the edge of the creek, he was smiling. Not because he was proud, but because he could feel her again. Margaret. Not in a ghostly way, but in the simple fact that she was right. That notebook, that little scribbled list, it wasn't just health advice. It was a lifeline that evening. Harold pulled out a yellow notepad and began writing something he hadn't attempted in over a decade, a journal. He didn't write about blood pressure or cholesterol. He wrote about how the air felt lighter, about the way his tea tasted richer, about how, when he opened the window, this morning, the birds didn't scatter like they usually did. They stayed watching. He started writing every day. It became part of the ritual. Wake up, eat his 5 fruits, walk to the grove, write. He tracked not numbers, but sensations. Slept 7 hours last night. Hands didn't tremble when pouring tea. Laughed out loud during an old Johnny Carson rerun. These were his milestones, and slowly his soul caught up with his body's healing. The neighbors noticed too. A woman named Connie, who ran the little bookshop in town, saw him carrying a bag of oranges and said, "You look younger, Harold." He laughed. Must be the fruit Frank Ever the skeptic asked if he was secretly dating a nutritionist. Even Dr. Lansing, when she bumped into him at the co-op, squinted at him and said, "You've been doing something, haven't you?" But Harold didn't offer a grand answer. He didn't become a health guru. He didn't write a blog or launch a fruit diet. He just kept showing up for his own life. And perhaps most importantly, he began to forgive himself for the years he let slip by after Margaret passed, for the afternoons he sat in the dark instead of walking outside, for believing the lie that aging meant fading. He realized something powerful. His body hadn't given up on him. He had given up on his body. But now they were back in sync. Body, mind, and memory. One morning, Harold came across a newspaper clipping tucked inside Margaret's notebook. It was from years ago, an article she'd saved titled, The human body regenerates every 7 years. In the margins she'd written, but what if we treated every day like a chance to begin again? Harold stared at it for a long while. That evening, as he looked out at the orange-pink sky, he whispered to himself, maybe I needed to break a little to remember how to heal. This wasn't just about 5 fruits anymore. This was about choosing to live with intention. And Harold was no longer surviving his 70s. He was rewriting them. 90 days. That's how long it had been since Harold first opened that notebook. He stood now in the sterile quiet of Dr. Lansing's office, the scent of antiseptic in the air, the same faded medical posters on the wall. But something felt different this time. Not the clinic, him. He wasn't hunched over. He wasn't winded from the short walk from the parking lot. And his hands, steady calm. Dr. Lansing entered with her usual clipboard, but paused when she looked up. Well, she said slowly, adjusting her glasses. Someone's been doing something, Harold chuckled. I guess you could say. I've been following a prescription from my wife. They ran the numbers. Blood pressure down. Cholesterol improved. Grip strength above average for his age. Reflexes better. Weight stable. The doctor flipped through her papers twice, brows furrowed. This is remarkable, Harold. What have you changed? He thought for a second, then smiled gently. I started eating 5 fruits a day. The same 5, every day. I walk a little more. I write. I sleep better. That's it. She stared, clearly expecting more. A supplement, a trainer, a new medication. But Harold simply leaned forward and said, turns out my wife left me something stronger than a cure. She left me a reason. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the trees lit up in gold, Harold returned home and sat on the porch. The same porch he used to stare from, feeling like life was slipping past him. But now it felt like it had paused beside him, sharing the stillness. A breeze moved through the maple branches, and Harold closed his eyes, feeling the air on his face. He no longer feared being alone, because he had rediscovered something deeper. Agency. Not over time, but over choice. He had chosen life, inch by inch, bite by bite. Word spread slowly at first. A neighbor told another neighbor. Someone mentioned Harold's fruit ritual at the senior center. Within a few weeks, he was invited to speak at the community library, not as an expert, but as a witness. A living example that change doesn't always begin in hospitals or with pills. Sometimes it starts at the bottom of a fruit bowl. Harold didn't give advice. He told stories. He told them about Margaret, about that dusty attic, about the day he nearly gave up, and about the small, almost laughably simple act that turned everything around. He ended every talk with the same line. You don't need to feel young again to live fully again. You just need to believe your body still remembers how. And people listened. Not because Harold had science behind him, but because he had something even stronger proof. Real quiet lived proof that healing is possible at any age when it's done from a place of love, ritual, and patience. Months later, Harold still kept his fruit ritual, still walked, still wrote, but now he also danced slow, shuffling dances on the back porch when no one was looking, sometimes with music, sometimes just with memory. One morning, he tucked a note into Margaret's notebook, sealing it inside for good. It read, "You saved me twice. Once with your love, once with your list." Finally understand what you meant by daily renewal. It's not about changing overnight. It's about waking up each day with the will to begin again. And if you're watching this now, wondering if it's too late for you, it's not. Harold didn't turn back the clock. He turned toward life, and so can you. So here's your invitation. Before the day ends, place 5 fruits on your counter. Just 5. Try it. Not for a miracle, but for momentum. Because sometimes the smallest rituals become the loudest promises that you haven't given up on yourself. And neither has your body. If Harold's story touched you, share it with someone you love, someone who needs hope. And if you're ready to take that first step, like Harold did, comment below. I choose to begin again. Because it's never too late to start living fully, one bite at a time.